Let's look at the wedge, or what we're calling the wedge shape. This one I dove in a little bit deeper in terms of its assembly, simply because I think it's the most, I guess, easiest to sort of figure out in terms of how we assemble it, how we print it, how we assemble all the parts. It wouldn't require having to flip the print, which is one less step. But here you see it on the trailer, and then I sort of exploded all the components, all the respective parts. And so what we would first do is sort of print this diaphragm. This would be 3D printed, concrete printed, as sort of a base, because then what we would end up doing is printing the side walls in two separate pieces. So here you see the wedge shape split in half. We would split it where the doors, where we have our door entry, and then our piece of glazing, our window on the opposite side of the door. So these two pieces would get printed separately, which would then make it easier to pick up. These are much lighter weight than one monolithic print. We would, same as what we discussed with the teardrop shape, we would fill this with our foamcrete. We would have threaded rod, that's what you see there, embedded within the walls, the print itself. That would all sort of happen during the print. Sorry, after the print, but once we fill it. And then we would fasten the SIP panel roof with the threaded rods, and then do whatever type of roofing membrane we wanted over that. The SIP panels would act both as the roof and the floor. So here you see the two SIP panel components for the floor. These are offset so that the panel that the stove is sitting on is slightly lower than the floor you walk on, simply because we want to get that stove as low as possible so that our bench heights, as you see in the model, the bottom bench is just at about the height of the top of the stove, which is ideal for spreading that heat out evenly around your body. So essentially what we're doing is we're clamping, the two wedge-shaped segments between the bottom diaphragm and the roof. And all of that would then get pinned down to the trailer itself. And so I think, having this little diaphragm as a single print allows us to kind of secure this down to the trailer ahead of time. It gives us something to sort of align with, so when we go to lift the printed segments, we have a target that we're, aiming to set those on. And the floor itself, you can kind of see these little tabs that pull out from the diaphragm. Those tabs would be little shelves to hold up the SIP panel floor. So you can see that would just drop right over the tabs to hold up the floor. Not a ton of weight going on there, just some humans walking. So I think it would work. I think the stove itself would sit, the SIP panel would sit directly on the trailer. We would obviously be waterproofing the underside of all this, basically waterproofing the trailer deck so that water is seeping in from underneath, and then all that would just assemble pretty easily, I think, from there.
So are you thinking that threaded rod would go all the way through that lower, I think you were calling it kind of a diaphragm, the thing in blue. It would go all the way through that and actually be the attachment mechanism of the whole thing to the trailer?
I'm still undecided on that. I think it would make sense. Maybe not all of the threaded rod needs to go through, but a few critical, at a few critical locations. These threaded rods go down through the trailer and then get bolted to some kind of steel plate, something underneath the trailer that allows us to sort of cinch all of this down. Yeah.
I like this one. I think it's clever. But maybe I'm just drawn to seeing it exploded out like that. I like looking at that part.
Yeah, I mean, it really helps to kind of understand the sequence of how it goes together. Not that, our teardrop shape again, the teardrop shape I think is less components. It's simpler,
Right.
in terms
Which
of,
has its
of
own benefit,
that.
like we said.
Yeah. I think the volume, interior volume between the wedge and the teardrop, the wedge is much smaller. I don't know exactly by how much yet, but just in terms of the footprint that needs to get heated, it's, you know, I would say, a third less maybe than the wedge. And so it's a much more efficient shape, I think, in terms of encapsulating that heat.
Those would seat the same number of people?
Not necessarily. I mean, depends on your comfort level. I think 3 people would fit comfortably in this one, in the wedge, versus this one, you have a clear 7.5 feet of bench space. So I think you could easily seat 4 in this one. So I would say 3 versus 4. Yeah.
Can you also lay down in the wedge?
You can, but you can see like the curvature along the back of the wall. As it comes around the far ends, it starts to eat up the dimension of the bench. But yes, you have a full 7.5 foot clear through the center of the bench. But again, that's not the whole depth of the bench.
Right.
Ultimately, also a small bill of materials, really.
Yeah, relatively speaking.